Welcome, Warlords, to the bleeding wilds of the Mortal Realms, because today we are talking all about the Animosity campaign for 2022, specifically talking about the Coalitions, meaning the factions that you and I can be a part of. If you are not familiar with what I'm talking about, Animosity is a totally free, fan-led narrative campaign that you can play from anywhere on the globe. I have a whole video talking about how to join it and what the lore is for this particular region in the description down below, but to put it very simply, you join a team, meaning a coalition, and each coalition has their own goals, what they want the final outcome to be, and then as you play games and put in votes for, the decisions of your coalition, you get to see them rise or fall on that journey. And so there are 6 coalitions total. Today we're going to tackle 3 of them, and we're going to tackle 3 in the next video. Now, one thing I'd like to add right up top here before we get started is that if you like this video and you're interested in playing Age of Sigmar or Warcry or anything like that set in the Mortal Realms, please consider using the affiliate link in the description down below, as Noble Knight Games is an awesome store here in the US with discounts on all GW products, and using that link does go a long way to supporting me, my wife, the channel, all of it. It's life-changing stuff and I appreciate every bit of it. So to do a bit of a sum up of this year's Animosity story, essentially there is a location in Chamon, the Realm of Metal, and a location in Gur, and the two are sort of warping into one another. Over the more recent years, Animosity has been following the path of a waterway known as the River, and basically every year's setting is some way connected to this river. That's kind of how they loosely tie all these things together while also being completely separate stories. Well, this year, the story is that the River is passing through this particular location in Chamon, Realm of Metal, known as Silverside. And as it's doing so, its magics are going crazy and wild, and it's pulling in parts of Gur. Long ago, there was a god beast, was struck down, and its essence and its physical form were separated. The physical form is in the Realm of Metal, its essence is in Gur, and so that beast, as the river magic River passes over it, is bringing those two realms together. The end result is a location where the Realm of Beasts and the Realm of Metal are starting to bleed into one another because of the river's presence. So one second you might be hacking away at a mine in Chamon, all of a sudden though there's a ripple effect, everything changes, and now you're in the Realm of Beasts running for your life from a giant dragon or whatever. I did a dedicated video going into a lot more explanation of the setting and why I think it's fantastic for storytelling from a perspective of us gamers, right? We have to have motivations for us to put our armies on the table and actually do battle. It's a lot of that. A lot of great teasers and narrative ends for us to have really cool stories about why our factions are fighting. But if you've been a part of Animosity before, you know that there's another level to that, and that is the coalitions. Essentially, think of them as like a Grand Alliance. Grand Alliance Order is just a collection of all the factions that, generally speaking, fight under the banner of order. Same thing for destruction, death, and chaos. Well, essentially the coalitions are one of 6 factions that you have to join if you want to participate, and they each have their own motivations and approaches to what's going on in this region of Gur/Chamon. Some of them are very selfish, some of them are quite nice, quite good in terms of helping the most people. But what I would really like to highlight for you, and I try to emphasize this every year, any faction can be a part of any coalition. We're going to talk about some that seem like, oh, those are the good guys, why would they ever let chaos factions into their midst? Because desperation, or at least the kind of desperation that this story fosters, is going to see heroes kind of get a little flexible on the rules. So if you as a player go out of your way to create a cool character and a cool story as to why they would be a part of any given coalition, you're doing it right. It's sort of like the little, role-playing element of if you put a little effort into explaining why X character is here, everyone's going to be super on board and happy that you're there. So approach it with that way. I decided to lean into a trope for my faction this year because I just simply didn't have time to write something bigger and better. But these coalitions, as we're describing them, unlike Grand Alliances, do not have any sort of moral leaning. They're just ways to clump players together so that we can all participate in something together. So don't overthink it. Pick one that sounds cool. And I'm going to present, like I said, 3 of them here today, and that's going to be the Sky Guard of Drak, Galbax Company, and the Nashuan Cabal. And so let's dig in. Starting with the Sky Guard of Drak. Now, Barak-Drak is a Kharadron Overlord skyport that exists in the realm of metal. It's a smaller one. It's not particularly, on the map, so to speak, in terms of its popularity. It yields very little ether gold. However, it is important as a location because it serves as a very big outpost on the offside of Chaman. Meaning it's a hub of trade, right? When you pass that, it's just open wilderness where there's even less ether gold, but it's an important outpost for some of those other factions to trade with. This could be anything from Dawnbringer Crusades moving in to resupply, re-equip before they go out to a next stretch. It could be access to trade for local Fire Slayer or Dispossessed lodges. Anyone who lives in Chaman, if you're in that region, well, it's already hard to get to, so it's sort of like the closest big city, in quotes, that anyone can go to. Now, part of what made this location so great is that it had alternate means of energy than just ether gold. And this is sort of a closely held secret for the people in the leadership of Barak-Drak. Most Kharadron overlords, flying cities or skyports require an immense amount of ether gold to stay up in the air. Well, of course, they're out in the middle of nowhere. They're in the boonies. There's not a lot of it. How else do they get this raw amount of energy? Well, it turns out, somewhat unbeknownst to them, their city was founded atop a naturally occurring energy deposit. And so initially they were like, oh, this is incredible. They built all these machines that could harness it. And that is how basically they stay in the black, so to speak, when it comes to how much ether gold they're taking in versus expending to stay in the air. What we are now learning along with them is that this moat of naturally occurring power, rather than being a magnetic deposit or something like that, is actually the arcane power inside the body of the god beast Majra Ru. Again, if you want the backstory there, go check out the first video in the Animosity series for this year. Link in the description. Well, as the River tore through this section of Chaman, the realm of Beast began to blur in and reality kind of got complicated. This natural, energy deposit, which has been untouched for generations upon generations, never had a problem with it, all of a sudden has started to sputter and give out. The reason for this is not entirely clear. It could be because whatever is going on with the bleed, meaning the mixing of Gur and Chaman, something there is diffusing the magic and therefore it's not as powerful. Perhaps the River redirects it to Gur, so normally it's, pointed straight up into the sky, that's where the energy goes. But as a bleed goes over the area, all of a sudden that energy is now redirected over to Gur, and there's just a moat of energy over there. Or maybe it's just dissipating because the god beast is trying to pull itself together. Regardless, without its power, the skyport began to sink, and eventually kind of somewhat gracefully crash-landed in the Verdigris Mountains in Chaman. Now, this was a catastrophic failure for both leadership and engineering. I mean, these things are titanic in scope. To crash down requires months of work and recovery and salvage to get it together and back in the air, assuming at that point that you have enough ether gold to make that a reality. The problem is, this crash landing was no small thing. In fact, a large number of the populace of this skyport was killed in the crash. As such, they are led by one surviving member of their Admiralty board, meaning the business leaders and all the people who keep contracts in line for a Kharadron Overlords society. They're almost all dead. There's one member left. Her name is Admiral Brayla. And as the last surviving member, she's seen unprecedented power and control over the skyport being administered. Normally, there'd be all kinds of squabbling about, well, my business doesn't reflect this, and this article and whatever footnote of the code. There's no arguments. There's one mind, which is a situation the Kharadron Overlords rarely find themselves in. Unanimous decisions are not the norm. Now, it's said here that Admiral Brayla has an immense knowledge of the code. Like, she knows how the Kharadron Overlords live their lives. She's a perfect example of their society. But that also means she knows how to bend the code and break it at will if necessary. So while she knows the letter of the law, she's not afraid of making concessions to get out of a sticky situation in the moment. Let me just throw some subtext in here and say it out loud for you. This is why you can have chaos factions in this. When people start bending the rules, it is a very slippery slope on who you let in. Because she has offered membership to any who would help them. She's granting them membership into the Skyguard Guild. Essentially, the police force, the protectors of this skyport. If you come and help us, get us back into the air, you will be set up in our skyport as a defender, as a hero. you'll officially be, one of us, and held in high esteem. And that's caused a lot of tension from the other surviving Keragen overlords there, because, on one hand, you could see the perspective of, this is a disgrace to what it means to be a part of the Skyguard Guild. They're supposed to be dwarves. They're on our side. They're like, the perfect exemplars of our faction. And then the other perspective is, well, the Skyguard Guild by definition, is just people who serve the common good and make sure that we stay in the air. So if you help us, you become one. And you can see these kind of like pulling tensions of, they both have a logic to them, of course, but this makes her a very controversial figure. Regardless, the stated mission of this coalition, get the Skyport back into the air. What it will look like morally once it's there is up to you, meaning the people they hired to do that. The next coalition here is Galbax Company, and this one's pretty short, but I frickin' love it. It's shameless profiteers, hucksters, flim-flam men, and traitors. This army, for lack of a better word, is more of a roving band of caravan traders, loosely operating from the free city of Fairwater over in, I believe this one's in Gur, but it is super far away. Regardless of what realm the actual core city is, they are nowhere near it. Essentially, these guys load up all of their wares, like I said, it's like a traveling caravan type thing, and they go on expeditions into the wilds of Gur. They sell things to any towns they can find, they entertain them, basically anything that they can do to get money, which is really their core theme. They don't have any fear of the realms. I mean, these are scavengers. They're constantly looking for all different kinds of resources, like natural resources, rock, crystals, that kind of thing, but also weapons, icons, all that. And so while venturing into the Bleeding Wilds is certainly an opportunity for them to make more money, what they're really looking for is what they call dragon metal, which we would know as bits of the god beast that has fallen in the area. So this one has a lot less lore in terms of how they got here. I mean, they are a trading company, but with a much stronger emphasis on being opportunistic, looking for opportunities and then responding in clever ways. Now, their hero that's leading this coalition is Profiteer General Galbax. And I'm going to read the description as they wrote it in the free PDF. Again, it's all in the description because I absolutely love it and I could not make a better synopsis myself. Ruthless, cunning, business savvy, Galbax has risen far in the world by knowing the value of putting coins in pockets and knives between ribs. None of his company know the exact terms of the deal he forged with the city of Fairwater, yet the letter of trade he received is clear. He has free rein to find new markets and exploits wherever they may be with the full support of the free city behind him, so long as they get their cut. Galbax has never failed to pay his backers or his followers, and does not aim to now. Now, if the name is not a giveaway here, this is led by an orc, a privateer orc. And so, very simply, I like this faction because it's just orcs with stonks. They're not all orcs. They work for a free city. Anyone can join this. I understand that, but the main figurehead is an orc, and I love it. And lastly, for today's video is the Nashuan Cabal. Simply put, this is a tight-knit group, or I should say cabal, of warriors, thinkers, and leaders, all focused on collecting and sharing arcane tomes and lore. Now, sharing is a complicated term here, right? If you're in the cabal, they believe in equal access to magical knowledge or items. If you need something, they provide it. They want to fully, evenly distribute arcane knowledge and power, which is noble. The problem is, if you're not inside the cult already, they take those things from you by force and then share them internally. I feel like that very simply puts forth why there would be some opposition to them. And I like this because magical societies are mentioned like all over the realms. Like academic groups meeting in the Towers of Hysh, to like weird necromancers that are all gothed out in dark dungeons in Shyish. But they communicate with one another. They have bodies of knowledge and study, and they at least have some kind of apprenticeship, something like that. Now, a lot of the societies mentioned in Age of Sigmar lore are only re-mentioned because they turned evil. Like, this was once a prospering bunch of cool people, and then Tzeentch came and turned them all into devils, that kind of thing. This is not that, or at least it hasn't gotten there yet. When word of the bleed, meaning the realms of Gur and Chamon bleeding into one another, when that reached the Cabal, they descended immediately. Like, they pulled out all the stops, opened all the coffers, and put the call out for anyone to join their ranks. Because they understood we need muscle, we need wizards, we need politicians for lack of a better word, but just people to coordinate and lead large expeditions. And that's exactly what these are. They aren't necessarily from any particular realm. The Cabal is coming to this region because of what's happening, which means they need explorers and researchers and mages and warriors, because these complex expeditions are over massive amounts of distance, dangerous terrain, people are dying left and right, so you always need more test subjects and all these kinds of things. People just go out there and just, what does that thing do? It sets people on fire. How do you know? 12 people got set on fire by it. All right. Like, you need those 12 people. Life is cheap. Magical items are not. And it might seem strange to have like a close-knit society. You know, I mentioned before that if you're in the Cabal, they're very cool with like sharing things. If you're not, they are not. And it might seem strange for someone who's that close-knit to have, you know, full open door policy. But you got to remember, they know that they're not going to share this with everyone that they hire because most of the people they hire are going to die. And when you and I play a part in the Animosity campaign, we are essentially acting as warlords that the Cabal has hired. Are you going to live? Are you going to die? It doesn't matter. All that matters is that you are useful to them. If you live, you must have been useful, in which case, heck yeah, why not? We'll share everything with you. And if you don't, well, I guess you weren't that useful anyway. And they are led by Vizier or Vizier, I don't know how to pronounce that word, I've heard different things, Nashuan. Nashuan is a very interesting character. It's actually a Sphinx with no magical capabilities. If you're not familiar, it's a creature from the Slaves to Darkness battle tome. Not inherently evil, it's just a creature that exists, but it does have human-like intelligence. It can communicate psychically, but it doesn't have necessarily magic power. And this makes an odd choice, but there's a real conviction for sharing arcane knowledge here. It needs to be accessible for everyone, and what better person to lead it than someone who doesn't innately have magical power. If they're satisfied, theoretically, everyone else is too. And so when I think about Nashuan, I really think of more of a visionary who's trying to lead a group to change the world, but is not necessarily the wizard using the power to do that change. Now, a subtext that's kind of put in here through a few different parts of this lore introduction is that the ultimate goal of Vizier Nashuan is to switch mind and body with the God Beast. Meaning, what if we could study this thing enough to where I could put my spirit in this empty body? Remember, the whole story of the God Beast is that its spirit and form were separated. Well, what if I just put my spirit in its form? It's an empty vessel. Which is I'm going to use the word gutsy plan. I like it a lot. I like the ambition, love the energy. It just seems like it's going to be a lot to accomplish that. But as far as, crazy ideas I've heard in Mortal Realms stuff, it's pretty on par, and I like it. Now, closing out today's video, why are these factions so cool? I'm just going to give a quick highlight to each one of them. And honestly, they're pretty simple. So, I like the motivations that the Barak-Drak has. And the moral ambiguity that someone like Admiral Brayla brings to the equation of we have to confront the old-timey views of what it means to be a Kharadron overlord in order to survive. And adapt or die is sort of the theme in my mind of the Kharadron overlords to begin with. Adapt or die was their situation when they were just dwarves in mountains and had to get into their first airships to run away from Tzeentch demons and Shaman. That was an adapt or die moment. This is another one. Your whole skyport hit the ground. Things are a mess. If we want to survive and stay safe, we need to get back in the air. How are we going to do that? We're going to adapt. We're going to bring in all kinds of new soldiers and resources. The price of that is going to be immense, though, because you don't know, one, who you're hiring, what their motivations are, and two, what your society will look like once you've achieved its goal. So I like that, because there's no easy right answer. It's just complex. As for Galbax Company, I said it before, I'll say it again, orcs plus stonks. I'm here for it. There's no other equation that needs to be said. The reason I couldn't do this video, like a video for each faction, is because that one would last about 30 seconds of me just saying orcs plus stonks over and over again, and doesn't make for great YouTube. And the last one being a highlight of magical societies is something we just don't see a whole lot in Age of Sigmar. They're always past tense. It turned into something good, or it got broken apart by X. We see stories of how good societies fell to Tzeentch and all of a sudden now they eat babies and stuff like that. It's like, well, that was either a really slow turn or transition, or you missed a very important work meeting that there's just no coming back from. How you get from point A to point B is a bit rough in terms of their lore, But this is one that's before all of that. And so when we think about how do these magic societies all keep turning apart or keep turning to chaos or become evil, well, it's events like this. When you open the doors because you need the bodies to achieve a goal, but in achieving that goal, if you invite a whole bunch of people that attack your morality like a virus, so to speak, from inside of the organization changing things, that's how you get from point A to point B. So for the simple premise of playing that out in the next couple of weeks, I'm sold. I like them. It's not the one that I chose. I'll go over that in my next video, but I love the concept here. So great job writing that, guys. Let me know in the comments down below which coalition you joined. I just want to say it again to make it very clear. Every army can be in any coalition. Do whatever you want. We're here for fun and profit in the case of Galbax Company. So have a good time. I look forward to seeing you all on the Animosity Discords. I'll chat with you there, and happy wargaming.